Hey guys, welcome back to our Zero to Hero, a Guide to Mythic Plus video series. If you missed the first video in this series called Add-ons, make sure to go check that out. After you finish this video, of course. Also, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn notifications on so you don't miss a thing. Alright, let's jump into it. Okay, so today we are talking about Mythic Plus and how to succeed in your runs. If you are just starting out, it can be a little bit overwhelming because there's a lot to learn. There are 12 dungeons, there's trash, there's bosses, there's the affixes, and then there's unique routes and skips for every single dungeon. It would be impossible to address all of those things in this one video, so instead I'm going to try and approach this by focusing on advice and resources that I found that helped me better comprehend all of these things, that helped me succeed in my runs, and made me a better player. Okay, so my first bit of advice is to run low keys at first. If you are just starting out in Mythic Plus, I found it very helpful to run as many low-level keys as possible. As a new 120, you can accumulate some gear upgrades this way, but it's also going to give you a more relaxed environment to see and learn the mechanics. I'm a big advocate of learning by doing and repetition, so that is how I approach Mythic Plus. When I first hit 120, I ran most of the dungeons on Heroic, and then was lucky enough to find a group that was stacking leather classes, which kind of helped me gear my rogue a little bit faster, and then after that I moved up to the next difficulty. The dungeons are designed to progress you incrementally, so I'd recommend gearing up in Heroics and then doing a few Mythic 0s, 1s, and 2s. The first mistake that I see a lot of new players make is that they want to skip lower keys, and some either do this through boosting or just through help of friends, and want to immediately jump into a 10 key because that's what their friends are doing. But, although this is appealing and you may get better loot in the long run, you're hurting yourself as a player because you're not really learning anything. The reality is the more dungeons that you run, the more you're going to learn and the better player you're going to become. So if you find yourself, struggling to understand the mechanics in certain dungeons, I'd recommend watching a few guides and spending some time in your dungeon journal reading over everything. One of my favorite resources is Tiqqles TLDR dungeon guides on YouTube. They're 2 to 3 minutes long and cover the mechanics for every single boss fight in every dungeon. When I was first learning these dungeons, I would often pull one of these up while I'm flying to the entrance and just use it as a refresher. So definitely check that out. That's on YouTube. It's Tiqqles TLDR dungeon guides. So my second tip is don't just run with the homies, but make sure you pug groups as well. A lot of players will only run with their guildies or a set group of friends, and so all their strategies and routes and group compositions kind of just become this big echo chamber. And I know that pugging can be frustrating and it has a lot of downsides, but if you have the patience for it, pugging is going to expose you to new strats, it's going to expose you to new routes, new group compositions, and overall it's just going to make you a better player. So I try and view pugging Mythic Plus like I do solo queue in games like League of Legends or Overwatch or other team-based games. You're going to have a series of runs where maybe you deplete or maybe the group falls apart halfway through. But then you're also going to encounter some new, more experienced players than you that you can learn some really interesting strats and techniques from. So, I personally have pugged maybe like 98% of my runs and have even heard from a few players that have pugged their way, to 4K IO. So, they were able to get a very high IO and do really high keys strictly through pugging. So, although having a set group of people may be more efficient in the short term, I'd strongly encourage people to do a mix of both. If pugging sounds a little intimidating to you, I'd encourage you to check out this resource that's called mplus.subcreation.net. It's a website that takes the affixes for the given week and places all the dungeons and classes in a tier list. You don't always need your groups to be perfect, but having an understanding of what dungeons might be easier for the week or which healers and tanks might be more optimal is definitely helpful when forming groups. So definitely give that a try. I think that this is probably something that has challenged me a lot as an individual, and it also makes Mythic Plus very accessible. You can log in, you can run a couple dungeons, and then you can log off. You don't have to schedule it or, sit down and plan something in Discord. You can just log in, do it, learn something, and then log off. So definitely give that a try, and I hope that that's helpful for you. Okay, so my next tip is don't focus on meters, but instead focus on utility. Now, with this tip, we're kind of getting into the grit of what it means to be a good Mythic Plus player. And, in this specific instance, I'm not really talking about gearing or talents or, builds, although I think that could be applicable. But really what I'm getting at here is more a shift in your thinking as you approach Mythic Plus dungeons. In Mythic Plus, there's going to be a wide variety of mechanics that you're going to encounter. There's going to be poop you shouldn't stand in. There's going to be specific targets that you want to CC, abilities you're going to want to interrupt, debuffs you're going to want to dispel. And at higher keys, you're going to be using this kind of utility on almost every single pull. In fact, some pulls have targets that you're going to want to interrupt that go all the way from 1 to 4 targets at a time. So, my recommendation here is to start practicing with this kind of thinking early on, that essentially you're developing good habits in the lower keys. So when you hit those high keys, you're going to see the benefits of your good practice. One of my favorite quotes comes from Vince Lombardi, which says, practice doesn't make perfect, but perfect practice makes perfect. And, I think that it's a little cheesy and could be on a poster on a wall somewhere, but I think it does apply to Mythic Plus. Even though you're in a lower key and maybe you can eat certain abilities or not CC certain targets, you won't be able to do that for very long. So start developing those good habits early on. And I think later on, when you do hit those high keys, you're going to reap the rewards and see the benefits. So my next tip might be a little bit obvious, but for whatever reason, some people don't tend to grasp this concept, which is ask questions beforehand and be a team player. Whenever I jump into a group, before we even enter the instance, I ask a couple questions like, where do they want lust? Are they planning on doing any skips? And which route are they doing? And these 3 questions kind of help set expectations for the group and remove any surprises. So if I ever think of a question, I try and ask it before we even start the key. And then the second part of this, be a team player, really has more to do with mindset. I think everyone at some point in time during Mythic Plus is going to make a mistake. And, you're going to make mistakes that are going to cost your group the key. You're going to make a mistake that's going to deplete the run. So, first of all, try and learn from that mistake. It doesn't feel good. You look back, it's kind of embarrassing to realize that you did something that depleted the key. So remember that feeling as well. And then when you see somebody else in your group make that mistake, treat them as you would want to be treated in that situation. So, I try and always be kind. I try and be nice. I'm never toxic. And I offer advice whenever advice is asked from me. Some people, for whatever reason, they just don't get this. But I think what it is it's a matter of having a healthy distance from your keys. If you run enough keys, you realize the more keys you run, the more keys you're going to time. So this specific run that you depleted is really not important in the grand scheme of things because there will be future runs. So what is most important is learning from your mistakes. I've had people call me names. I've had people yell expletives at me. But then I've also had people say that I'm the best player they've run with in a long time and that they want to run more dungeons with me. So that's always really nice to hear. A lot of gamers just don't understand this mentality. It's a positive mentality, and I really do believe that it helps you be more successful. Don't get angry when things go wrong. Don't blame others, but instead focus on yourself. Focus on what you can improve. And then if you see someone else doing something good, then compliment them on that. So if I ever run with a tank and I really enjoy, the pace in which he's pulling mobs or the route that he picks, I try and tell him that. I think that you did a great job on this run. And chances are you're going to make some friends, and then you can run some future groups with them down the road and form some friendships. So just keep that in mind, that you can only control yourself. So when you stay humble and when you offer advice when asked and when you compliment others, this is a good thing for you as a whole in Mythic Plus as a Mythic Plus player, and will help you find more success in the more runs that you do later on. So my last tip is very obvious, which is be a good player. Okay? And that's harder than it sounds, but people will often look at the damage meters and see that they topped the meters, or maybe they were the best healer, or maybe they were the highest rated tank or whatever, and then they get complacent and they settle for their achievement, which I don't want to underrate that. Doing good on the meters is fine and all, but it doesn't necessarily make you a good player. Being good is about knowing your class as well as other classes extremely well. It's about knowing all the dungeons like the back of your hand. It's about studying up on all the nuances that you will experience whenever you enter a certain dungeon. You know, there's so much more to being a good Mythic Plus player than just being the best in a specific run. So don't settle. Continue to stay humble. Continue to think creatively about ways that you can time a key. Because I think that's oftentimes, especially in the World of Warcraft, you know, realm, we like to copy other people, which is great. Like copying other people's and learning strats that they have done is great. But really what we need is we need more ingenuity. We need someone to think outside the box about ways that they can continue to be a better Mythic Plus player. And so that's not settling for an IO score. That's not settling for topping the meters. That's not settling for the fastest run. You know, it's about continuing to improve and continuing to think outside the box about how you can be a better player. There are an infinite amount of possibilities in World of Warcraft and an infinite amount of knowledge that you can learn about all of the classes and all the dungeons. So never settle, never get complacent, and continue to improve as a player in Mythic Plus, and you're going to have the most fun and the most success that you could find whenever you're playing this game. If you want to improve but you aren't really sure where you should start, I'd recommend checking out this Mythic Plus tips and tricks Google Doc that I found on the competitive WoW subreddit. It offers some next level advice and tips from the community for all the dungeons in BFA and can be a great starting point for you to examine your routes, how you're handling certain mechanics, and will be a good help for you to start thinking creatively about your runs. Alright guys, so that's the video that I have for you today, and I hope that it was helpful for you in terms of becoming a better player and finding more success in your Mythic Plus runs. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that subscribe button, as well as follow me on Twitter and Twitch, as that will really help out my channel a lot. So thank you guys for watching this video. Stay tuned because next time we will be talking about how to find groups in Mythic Plus. See ya!